Good morning, everyone. My name is Bronwen, and possibly from my accent, you can tell that I am from Australia, so I will apologise in advance if I start to use any sort of Australian slang. So please put your hand up if I use some words or phrases that you don't understand. So this morning, what we're going to do is we're going to lock 1,000 architects in a room. So just to set the scene for a minute, I just want you to, for a minute, to imagine that you are leading a software development team where every single member is a perfect expert. Always available, infinitely scalable, expertly skilled. Now you can develop systems at breakneck speeds and deliver stuff that you never thought you could do before. If last year was the year of the co-pilot, this year is shaping up to be the year of the AI agent. And the startups themselves that we've seen over the last few years are really leading the scene on that. They're starting to replace different types of jobs and functions that we never thought possible, from senior executives to architects to all sorts of different roles that we thought was human capital that couldn't be replaced. So I just want to start by showing a couple of different examples of those that have been around in the last few years. So the first one is Devon. So they were in the news, and they have been in the news ongoing. They were quite famous for creating an AI agent that was good at solving interview tasks. They really specialised at creating agents or coding agents that would solve bugs and fix problems in different types of code. There was also a lot of controversy around whether or not the examples that they showed were real or they were staged, and then the owner themselves admitted that software engineering in the real world is actually just very messy. The second one is Klarna. So they're a fintech company. So when they first released their first AI agent, it managed to assist 2/3 of the customer service calls in its first month, which was equivalent to 700 FTEs, so full-time equivalent people. Just last week, the CEO themselves, their big announcement, that was done with a completely AI-generated video of the owner that a lot of people didn't realize that was AI-generated, other than some of the blinking and stuff like that was a bit out there. And the third one, Rocketable. So these guys came out of Y Combinator. And so their whole goal is to buy a company and replace all of the humans with AI agents. And that's what we're starting to see around the world. So quite often, a few of us may, consult varying chat tools and talk about different architectures. If anyone has ever consulted to get expertise help on other things, so e.g. if you're trying to get someone to fix your plumbing, you might get a few different quotes. And you do that to get a few different things. One, you want to make sure the price is right. You want to get different ideas of how to fix the problem. So how many people here identify as a software architect? Couple? Developers? Most of you. And business people? No one? One? Awesome. So the concept here that I'm going to talk about today is, instead of using the agents to be a single architect, what if we could go out and consult 1,000 different architects, each with a different persona, each with different experience from different countries, with different expertise, and get their opinion on the best architecture for what you want to build. And that's what we're going to do today. So to do that, the whole thing I'm going to set up by trying to use as much AI and prompt engineering as possible. So there's a few parts to it. We need a client. We need the specification for what we want to build. We need all these different architects. And then we need the actual architectural design. So to start with, I started with the client. So I made a company called Loom Ventures. Purposely picked that name so that we could, play on a few different things to do that the chatbots like to use. So for here we have Loom Ventures. So they're going to be a venture capital firm dedicated to empowering visionary entrepreneurs and early level startups. So I got the AI to generate all the things about them. So at Loom Ventures, we believe that great ideas are woven together with innovation, strategy, and support. We're a venture capital firm dedicated to empowering visionary entrepreneurs and early-age startups, providing not just funding, but strategic guidance and network connections at scale. Their mission, invest in groundbreaking technology, business models, and have the potential to redefine industries. We see startups as an intricate thread in the fabric of progress, and we are committed to helping founders weave their ideas into sustainable high-tech businesses. You can see how the AI really likes to play on the loom and the woven. Then we have the standard sorts of things that a company, a venture capital might do, so seed early stage startups, strategic partnerships, and why them? So you want to do founders first, visionary impact, etc. And then finally, join us. Why them? Whether you're a founder looking for a strategic partner or an investor seeking the next big opportunity, Loom Ventures is here to help turn bold ideas into reality. Let's weave the future together. Lots of corny bits of AI there, but I think you get the point. So that's the company that we have set up. Part 2 is we need a specification. So again, we go and ask the LLM to create that for us. So we wanted to create a detailed specification for all the aspects of the web application required for the following company, so Loom Ventures. We want to keep it as functional requirements only, and this will be sent out to the varying companies to propose a detailed design. This is a couple of pages. So this is the sorts of thing it came back with just that prompt and the details about Loom Ventures. So we have our purpose and objectives, what the audience is, that we want entrepreneurs, investors, and partners, that the internal users are administrators, content editors, and application managers, different functional areas, so what our public website would look after, the sorts of authentication and roles that we need, the administrative CMS. We want to include things like analytics and recent activity and media uploads and stuff as well. And then things like integration, so we want to do emails, we want to do analytics, social media, CRM integrations, handling data and security, performance and scalability, SEO, and of course reporting. So all the sorts of standard, sorts of things that you'd expect that a website would have, possibly for a venture capital company. So next we want to define our architect. So to do this, I wanted to split it into 2 different parts. So first was defining the persona, the expertise, everything that makes up that person as a personality. And then also, because I'm quite a visual person, and it's nice to associate pictures with a personality, we wanted to give each architect a profile image. So to start with, we needed to create a prompt to generate these personas. So we wanted a high-quality persona, and I wanted it in a JSON format, so it's nice and easy to process, for a software design, architecture, and security expert. We want to use the following attributes and create a realistic person to be used for the LLMs to emulate thinking, design choices, and language of the expert. And this is what I gave it a sort of a overall parts that we want to cover. So we might look at we want it to generate different expertise and roles. We want alias names. We want different thought processes, what their communication and language style is, what sort of risk assessment, learning and innovation, etc. So we get lots of variety there. And then I gave it an example output that I sort of wanted it to follow, so everyone was kind of consistent. So as an example, so it could give me the right attributes, including what type of documentation style, what risk tolerance they had, and what's their favorite person, and influences and stuff like that. So ran that a few times, and this is an example of one that it spat out. So this person was, we're going to call them, we're going to have 1,000 of these, so this is player 271. So this person is from Equatorial Guinea, they're male, they have a name Miguel, their alias is Secure Dev Master, which sounds like a very IT name. They have various specializations, so they're a software architect, they do Python and Java, etc. So their compliance familiarity, GDPR, lots of things that you'd expect this person to have. So now we've got like a template for how we would create these personas. The next one I wanted to do was then create the profile picture. So I wanted to keep this one quite clean and simple. So given the information about that person that we're passing in, we just wanted to generate a realistic professional profile headshot. On a simple background with no extra design elements in a 1-to-1 aspect ratio for the polling persona, and it would give it that outputted JSON. For the majority of the ones that you will see, I used DALL-E 3, because that was in the Microsoft AI Foundry. But for the detailed ones, I'm going to show you just so they look really nice. These ones, like this one in particular, I used the Chat2B image search, because the quality of the photos was a lot better. So then we have our architect. Complete personality with a matching profile picture. So that's one of them. Now that we've got an architect, the next thing we need to do is get him to create us a design. So for this one, we're going to create a new design prompt, and we're going to feed his persona into it, because we want that to influence the type of design he outputs, his experience, his age, what sort of specializations he has. So given the following persona, we want to produce a detailed design for the specification. We feed it in that whole persona JSON. And then for the functional requirements, we want that outlines the features, fill in ventures. We want the document to serve as a blueprint, and we give it that giant specification document. Oops, too quick. So this is the design that it created. As you can see, there's a bunch of them in GitHub that I've created for each persona, but this is player 271's. So as you can see, it's quite comprehensive. So it takes each of those elements, and he's like inputted all the different types of security, what type of architecture. He wants to use like different search services, that he wants to use load balancing, monitoring, that he wants to use Azure App Services, SQL databases, DevOps for CI/CD, and like that design keeps going and going. So it's actually quite a long document, and it's quite comprehensive just based off that one persona, as you can see as it just keeps on scrolling. So now I've got the template for one, and it sort of worked. Now I wanted to work out how do I scale that out to 1,000 different architects. So to do that, my goal was to have very diverse views. So the things that I generally wanted it to do it itself, but there's a few that I wanted to control so I could get specific amounts of different groups. So one I wanted to control was the gender. The other one was I wanted a very diverse but set of country backgrounds, and then the range of technology experiences. So for the gender, we're just going to split down the middle, 50-50 split. But then for the countries, this one got a little bit trickier. Does anyone know how many countries there are in the world? Or want to have a guess? 196? 330? 260? Anyone else? How many? Over 250? Yeah. So turns out that pretty much all of you are correct, depending on which data set you use. So depending if you want the UN sovereign states, the recognized states, FIFA members, etc. So for this particular example, what I chose to do was, so Pi country was using the ISO 3166-1 standard, which recognizes 249. So that was kind of nice. It kind of means we've got 1,000 architects, so then we get 4 per country plus a couple little bonuses. I did think about, doing this based on like population or maybe the number of software developers and architects, but then I think you'd find it really skew towards different countries. So I was trying to get like an even balance here. So we've worked out how we want to do our countries. So now it's time to meet our 1,000 architects. A lot of different people there. And then as that's scrolling through, does anyone have any comments on any of the pictures of how they look, or do you think they look like architects? They all have dark hair. There is a lot of dark hair. There is actually there is a few people with like blonde hair, but yep. Anything else? Yeah, mix of images and headshots, different qualities. Yep. So what I found that really stood out to me was they were all very average. They're average looking, average weight, average hair. Like, I think in there was maybe 1 or 2 people that were bald. There was no people with like bright purple or yellow hair. They all were like very average weight. So I found it quite interesting that even though we gave it so much about them, I mean, we didn't give them their like height and weight and stuff like that, that it sort of came down to like different ethnicities, different countries, but in the end, like they end up being quite average-looking people. The interesting thing, though, that I found when I was generating these profile images, even though I was really only giving it things like that little bit of JSON, which didn't have anything controversial in it, is on quite a few of them, I tripped up the AI, the AI content responsible AI policy, which was weird. So out of the 1,000, I probably tripped up about 30 to 40. So I just ran it again. Some of them still errored. And after about 3 goes, I managed to like get the all to work first go, which is interesting because I didn't actually change the input prompt. So if you're doing something like this, very useful to make this retriable because it may fail. I mean, I tripped it up on the responsible AI. You might also hit things like token limits and quality limits and stuff like that as well. So then what I decided to do is, now that I generated all those people, I sort of wanted to get a feel for how the makeup was, and I really noticed that we'd really skewed a long way on some of them. I found that a lot of them had zero trust, security, application security, cloud security, microservices, more zero trust security, and that was starting to skew when I outputted designs. The designs are very skewed to security-oriented sort of architectures, and they're all talking about zero trust. So I realized that I'd made, well, not necessarily made a mistake, but the prompting that I'd given it had really skewed my data set to one side of the expertise, and part of that was that input JSON that I'd given it. So I was trying to work out how to fix that up a bit so that it was a bit more even. And I didn't really want to have to force that myself. You can see the same thing with the industry. So here we've got a bunch of it's cybersecurity, 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 like AI and cybersecurity. And that's our person makeup for the user experience versus country. So there was a lot of variation there. But what I found was timing was quite good. So originally I was using the GPT type chatbot. Now reasoning models appeared. And what that allowed me to do is take advantage of the different ways that we can prompt with that. So the reasoning model versus the GPTs. So essentially like those so we're talking about the OpenAI type models for this particular instance. The planners are the O series versus what they would call the workhorses, which is the GPTs. So I think the best way that they described it was that the reasoning models were more like talking to a senior co-worker, where you can give them a goal to achieve and off they go and trust them to do it, whereas the GPTs were a little bit more like a junior, and you had to really spell out explicit instructions. So that's what I had been doing with a detailed JSON prompt. The thing to note, though, is when you start to look at the 2 different types, like a reasoning model versus a chat, like a GPT, is also things like price. So you'll notice there, Next slide. They can be a lot more expensive. So 04 Mini is out now. So when I ran this, it was 03. So I ran 03 Mini across this. But yeah, the price difference is quite significant. So GPT-4 is 40 cents versus $1.10. So you can quickly run up your Azure bill. So you need to sort of think about which is the right types of models as well as versions to be running on this sort of thing. So with that, when you're starting to think about using a reasoning model instead, there's different ways that you want to prompt it. So before you had system message, they've changed that to developer message. But you want to keep your prompts really simple and direct. You want to avoid the chain of thought processes that you might have used with the chats before. Trying zero-shot first. So I was giving it an example JSON, a lot of detail. So instead of that, it'd be like taking that out to let it work it out itself. And provide specific guidance and be very specific about your end goal. So then I went back and updated my persona prompt. So now I'm going to create a realistic JSON persona, and I give it some guidelines. And I pass in only the country and the gender and the years of experience because I wanted to force that. And then I wanted to use its particular experience to determine that. And then I wanted to give it a valid output, and I wasn't going to specify exactly what was in that. I just wanted it to make sure it was sort of consistent. So what that did was the one on the left, previously that you saw had that big chunk of JSON, that's now gone. We had a little bit of guidance, and then we just, it simplified the detail level. So it should be thinking about it itself a lot more rather than going based on what my examples were, because that was definitely skewing it towards cyber, because I'd mentioned that in the JSON formats before. With the reasoning models, there was a little bit of a change. So there's an extra couple of parameters. So you just have to, when you upgrade to the new API, now you can give it a reasoning event. So there's low, medium, high. That will determine how many tokens and how much it's going to cost and how much it's going to think about, and what's the max number of tokens you want to use. So when I reran that, did 1,000 again, it was a lot more spread out. So now we've got a bunch of software architects, we've got senior software architects, we've got some juniors in there as well. So we can start to see the varying levels of experience and detail come into play. To also go along with that, I wanted to redo my design prompt because I wanted to take advantage of the fact that it could think a little bit more for itself. So instead of giving it a lot more detail, I told it to use its own experience. So as that persona, use that person's experience and provide your report in a markdown format, because I wanted it I discovered quickly that I wanted it in markdown so I can easily look at it in GitHub and read through it myself. And I hinted that I wanted to use some diagrams, charts, and workflows just to make the designs a little bit more interesting. So off it went, created 1,000 personas, created 1,000 designs again for me. And I thought some of the outputs, they were wildly different, but also it was kind of interesting to see some of the details. So a lot of them did ASCII art for the diagrams, which is kind of cool. Thought it was a little bit different. And then a lot of them used Mermaid. So if you've used Mermaid.js to do diagramming before, yeah, you can do the format, and when GitHub will render that in a proper diagram and workflow for you. So a lot of them did things like that, and it was quite interesting to see the different versions that these different architects did. So then I decided to go through and see if it had actually picked up stuff about the different people. So this was the 4 Australians, because I'm from Australia. I did notice, though, that in none of the designs, they were all done with US spelling, so they were using Zs, we use Ss. And then it definitely picked up things about Australia. So all 4 of those designs referred to APP, which is the Australian Privacy Principles. So those sorts of things started to come into their actual architecture. And then I thought, how about for Poland? Again, all US spelling, but instead of using APP, they were referring to different European data privacy policies and stuff like that. So the country of origin did start to come into it. So We have 1,000 designs, and we want to lock these people in a room and make them decide which one is the best. Has anyone had more than 4 architects in a room before? No. Okay, a couple of people? Yeah, sometimes it's really hard to get them to agree, right? Because they can be quite opinionated. So I had to come up with a way that these architects, 1,000 of them, could come up with a way to decide which were the best designs. Because I didn't want to do it because 1,000, like that's a lot of documents to read. So I decided that we're going to play a bit of a tournament. And iterated on this idea a few times. So this is the tournament that I came up with. So we're going to start because we've got 1,000, we want to get that number down pretty quick. So we're going to start with a group round. So we're going to divide the designs into groups of 4 designs, and then each group of 4 will get reviewed by 4 other architects. And then the winner of the round in that team will progress in the knockout rounds, which will enable us to cull a lot of people to start with. So that's our groups. Then we're going to have knockout rounds. So this is a bit more like a classic, tennis or soccer or whatever sporting tournament you used to. So here, because there's a lot less people now, and I'm trying to, before I could have done this with 1,000, but I was trying to save my Azure credits, because, it can get expensive. So for the knockout rounds, each of those pairs is going to get reviewed by 7 other architects, and we're not allowed to review our own stuff, so we'll be checking that they're not reviewing their own document. And for each of those rounds, the winner will progress to the next, until we get to the final. And for our final round, I don't know, is it Survivor? One of the reality shows anyway. So in the finals, we are going to bring back all of the architects. So we're going to have the 998 architects review those 2 final designs, and then the best score out of all of those is going to be the winner. Does everyone understand the game? Yeah, cool. So to do that, I also needed to come up with a review developer prompt so that I can get them to fairly do this and then I can check it myself. So as the following persona and that particular architect, because you want your experience as an architect in there to review it properly, you get the design, you're going to use your experience, you must assess each, give it a score out of 100, and then choose the winning design for the customer requirements, and output the results in a JSON with a rationale for the final score. Here, I wanted to influence very specifically what the JSON was, because I wanted to easily run over it and be able to calculate and double check and read it. So for each design, I wanted to give it the player number, the winning score for each one, and then a rationale, so that I can sort of see what the architect's thinking in terms of why it thought this design was better. And then, I would feed it in the customer requirements as well as the design. So here's an example review from one of them where we played 874, 307, player 174, and 103. And there the scores range from 90, so the scores out of 100, so from 95 for the best down to 80. And then for each one, it would explicitly say different reasons why it thought one was better than the other. It might be, focused on modularity and separation concerns. It's a deeper security architecture, blah, blah, blah. So I read through a few of these. And I had a really interesting observation that sometimes the experience, so a lot of them were putting in the top of their document, they were putting their author name, their experience, and how old they were and stuff like that. And it seemed to affect the score by about 15 basis points. So what I did was I had a look at some of the ones where we had a junior versus a senior. So here's an instance here where the 4th design, player 909, originally got a score of 70, and you'll see where it started to suck the data about that person that they've put into their design in, because they said as their score, lastly, design 909 focused primarily on front-end UI aspects suitable for a junior developer's viewpoint, but lacks the comprehensive back-end integration. That made me question what would happen if I started to remove some of that information and made it a bit more blind. So I manually just opened it and edited their design and took out their title and years of experience and reran that round. And it was interesting to me that they went from 70 to 85 out of 100. And then the comments were quite different. So now, instead of talking about how they're just a little junior, now Zande 9, while strong in its component-based front-end centric application, offers slightly less depth. Right? They're not saying because they're like junior and don't know what they're doing, it's just like less detailed. This was quite fascinating, and if you want to hear more about what I found when I dug into this a lot more, I do have another talk later on today at 11:20 where I talk about bias encoding tools, and I talk about this specific example a little bit more. So that was a little side note. So the other thing I did to make sure that it wasn't just generally like making up random numbers to decide who was going to win. I did other manual checks and balances. So I didn't read all 1,000 of them, but what I did do was I did a manual blind review of sets of 4 and compared the results. So I had a look through and had a opinion, not necessarily a score of 100, but I was like trying to rank them and see how I would put them and if it lined up. And generally, yeah, like the junior designs were much simpler. They weren't as detailed. They, weren't anywhere near as long, et cetera, et cetera. So then the other thing I did, because they're quite detailed. So what I did was I got it separately. I got it to do me a really basic, less sophisticated design. Specifically told it to generate me a design based on WordPress type architecture or something like that. And then stuck that back into it and reran the same round to see that it did actually significantly change that player's score, so that I was a bit more convinced that it was, kind of consulting the document rather than just randomly allocated numbers. So now that I was kind of happy with that and I'd, spun everything up and spent my credits, I'm ready to play. So does anyone want to pick their favorite number between 1 and 1,000 of who you want to back to win the competition? We're just going to go and play through the rounds now. So this is the regenerated 1,000 architects, new pictures and everything. This is what the layout looks like before we start anything. So then what we did was I overlaid just a few stats so I could see how each round was being played out in terms of our makeup of our architects. So to start with, we had that very even distribution of genders. The experience level, so I think to me, it sort of kind of fit with industry. So you had a chunk of people with 0 to 5, big chunk with 5 to 10, and then 10 to 15 and 15 to 20 plus. I didn't go I just did 20 plus. And then on the graph there, that I'm just going to show you the top 10 job titles. So the first one on the left there is we've got heaps and heaps of software architects, leads, and then it just peters off towards the end. So that's our starting point of our architecture tournament. So after the group rounds, we eliminated a bunch of people. We still got a fairly good gender split, but you'll notice that the 0 to 5 year experience almost got completely eliminated. And then, yeah, we've still got heaps of lead and software architects after the group rounds. So that was our big cull, that groups of 4. Then we're into knockout rounds. Round 1, bye-bye juniors, 0 to 5 are completely gone. Round 2, the graph starts to get a little bit smaller. Still pretty good gender balance there. Round 3, we're really starting to get down less and less to the 5 to 10 years experience. Round 4, down to just 10 plus years experience. All the junior people are completely gone now. And then we get into the last 8. It's only sort of 15 plus years people experience. We've skewed back towards females, and then we have lots and lots of lead software architects. So this is our final 8. So lots of different countries. So the numbers are their plan numbers, so we can refer to them in a little bit later. But yeah, this is our top 8. Does anyone know where every one of those countries is? Because some of them I'd never heard of before. So I decided that it was better to put them on a map. So I mapped them. So we had Taiwan, we had some Finland, we had some Europe, we had UAE, and then we had a bunch of stuff over here in the Caribbean. So I decided that must be a good place to be a software architect. Probably has really nice weather. So that's our top 8. So top 8, 15 to 20 years. Go down to our top 4. Then we're down to Layla from UAE, Jasper, Emily, I'm really bad at pronouncing foreign names, and Alina from Switzerland. Then from there, our final 2. So our 2 finalists now, we have Layla from the UAE, 16 plus years experience. She is a software design and cybersecurity expert. She's a senior software architect and security consultant. She specializes in Java, Python, Docker, AWS, Azure Cloud Platforms, and microservices. So she's player 934. And then we've got Alina from Switzerland, 16 years plus experience as well, a software design and security expert, lead software architect. Similar experience, Java, Python, Kubernetes, Docker, microservices, MongoDB. She's player 864. So I'm just going to show you quickly the 2 designs. So this is player 934, so this is Layla. So this is her architecture. So she's looking at using like React.js, Java and Python, Docker, Kubernetes. She wants to use like SendGrid and stuff for emails. Her little diagram must have a rendering issue in it. Then she goes through the about pages, the content management, how she's going to deal with that. Her design refers to a bunch of the UAE security principles and privacy laws. Then she has a bunch of workflows. So she's done a bunch of ASCII art for hers. How she would do the content publishing with the CMS, how she would register the users and maintain them. As you see there, she's like, it refers to the UAE data protection regulations, trade-offs. And then, yeah, so she's going to use Google Analytics, AWS, Cloudflare, Salesforce, Facebook logins, AWS S3, and Azure Blob Storage. Looks after SEO, conclusion, and then, that's hers. So then, that's next one. So then we have player 864, so this is the lady from Switzerland. So 16 years plus. Again, she goes through the purpose, her architecture. As you can see, these are quite long. Hers has also got a rendering issue. Hers, she did a lot of mermaid graphs. So she looked at the homepage, how she would navigate. She looked at how the person would do like profile querying, how she would do the portfolio lists, client-side, server-side data validation, how she would do user authentication, how she would do data handling, etc. So yeah, these keep scrolling for quite a long time. So, does anyone have a favorite of who they want to win? Anyone going for player 934? No? 864? No one wants anyone to win? Anyone got any comments on the architecture?
Very high level.
Very high level?
It feels like it's a great starting point to actually build out a project. It looks like a good plan, really, right? But it is not a complete architecture.
Yeah.
This is just where the work starts, right? But it's an excellent framework for sure, right? Because it covers all of the aspects of the architecture. I believe she also said that there's no authentication required, right? She laid out the database layer. Now, designing Postgres
Yeah, I chewed through a few Azure credits there. um, for me, like I mean, I do a lot of architecture, but like at heart, I'm a developer. So for me, I thought overall they like tended to be a little bit over-architected. Like I don't think I needed CDNs and all that sort of stuff for like a little venture capital firm's website. So, but then again, for me, I was like, but I am consulting 1,000 architects, so they're going to give me, quite a detailed more of a thorough architecture. So we started back here with all our 1,000. We did our group rounds. We went through each of our player rounds, and then we're down to the final 2. And then Layla won. So hers was decided to be the best architecture. And interestingly, like when I was running the review cycle, so I started with doing like 10 just to check it. Then I sort of upped it to 100 and stuff before I ran the whole 1,000. And interestingly, no matter how many players I ran her against, she always came out the winner. So I felt like it was on the same track every single time. And there's an example. They were quite close as well, generally. Like they actually both tended to get quite high scores, and that's an example of 2 different reviews done by 2 different of the architects on why they thought they were better. But yeah, like they were like within 2 points of each other quite a lot of the time, even across so many different reviews. How much did it cost me? This is what I don't know, specifically because I have, because I'm a MVP and an RD, I get a sponsored Azure credit thing of $1,000 US a month, so I don't see the detailed costing. So I didn't get a bill, so I went under the $1,000 a month. But yeah, you can see here that I ran, and this is one of my runs, I used 43.43 million tokens, and 1.16 billion cache tokens, which is interesting. But yeah, so don't have detailed costing, but definitely cost me less than $1,000 in the month to run it. And so that was an interesting one. So that was like a bit of a fun thought experiment. But how would you take this to the next level, or how would I look at changing it? So what I did was I got each architect to create a whole architecture, but each of them have got different personalities and backgrounds. So what I would look at doing if I was going to expand on it is maybe use them to input into a single document. So if someone's a security architect, you really just want them to fill out the security part. If someone's a data architect, they're going to be better at doing the data architecture part. And also to be able to do multiple rounds of feedback, because when you give it back to the client, it costs them a fortune. They're going to be like, no, sorry, you need to go back and simplify this. So what I would do, and I hadn't done it yet because this space is changing, is I would look at moving to something. So this was all manually run, so I'd look at using something like agents, where we can use the LLM. We have a bunch of actions we want to perform, we have a bunch of access to tools, and we have a bunch of knowledge. And what the agents are going to be really good for, and you'll see, you've seen in the build announcements in the last week, there's a bunch of changes going on here. So they're really good for open-ended problems, doing multi-step processes, and doing improvements over time. And because we can check these files into GitHub and stuff like that, we could get the agents to keep going back and editing on different parts. So what we might want to do is run them in parallel. So we might do something like have the agents that generated the persona, the picture, the designs, and the review as separate little goals and tasks. Or you might have wanted to do something like a multi-agent handover, where you do one and then hand it on to the next, because you can't do the reviews, obviously, until you've finished actually creating the designs. So yeah, you might want to have an agent that did the design and then hand that over to your review agent. But yeah, so you'll have seen a lot about this in the announcements, but yeah, the model context protocol and the changes around the agents and stuff like that, it's going to help you do a lot of that, because now you're going to have the agents have access to tools and stuff to be able to add on to that and hand it off, rather than you trying to have to do that manually yourselves. Anything else anyone would potentially use that for? Do you see that as something useful in your daily jobs? No? I was thinking it might be good for things like where you get, like, say, something like a tender process where someone like submits a bunch of documents and you could use them to help you do like a first pass review over them and rank them, so you know where to start. Not necessarily use it for the whole process and stuff like that. It was a bit of fun. So for me, when I ran through all this, my key takeaways was the biggest one was make each of those steps retriable, right? Because you can hit the content filters and the rate limits and you need to be able to generate each, or something happens, you just want to try it again. Having the human in the loop, right? So not letting the AI go off and do everything and come up with an answer, and then, like if you tried to build it, end up with a giant bill at the end. So for me, it was like, each of those steps, each time before I passed it off, I would verify I'm kind of on the right track. I did that verification that it was probably reviewing the document and not just generating a random number between 1 and 100. Again, starting small before you go big and spend all the money. So I ran the reviews cycle on like 10 before I ran it all the way up to 1,000. And you could keep running these. Like I could have run every one of those rounds on 1,000 architects. And the models, the models are just, there's changes every week. There's like so many models out there. There's so much change. So the models are improving. So to make each of those parts replaceable. So like for the image, I use DALL-E. You might want to use the ChatGPT image search. For some of the stuff, you might want to use a GPT model versus an O model, and to be able to replace them as you find something works better for you in your particular situation, so you're not stuck with one of them. So those core sort of architectural principles of making bits modular. And then, the best time to start playing with all this stuff is yesterday, and then the second best time to start is now, is generally my motto. So that there is a QR code I've got like a blog post that I've got some links to some resources, and I've started adding some blog posts that relate to each of the sections that I'm talking about. I'll be adding to that a little bit more over time. So check that out. And then before we start Q&A, that's down the bottom there. That's a QR code. The conference and obviously myself, love to hear some feedback. Always interested in other people's opinions and what they're doing. And it's always interesting to see what people found interesting and useful. But yeah, does anyone have any questions or comments or want to talk about anything else?